Well, almost exactly 5 years ago, Salon got on the Latinx train. In an article titled, "Forget About Latino, Why I'm All for Latinx, and You Should Be Too," writer Yesenia Funes hailed the term Latinx as a needed response to the male-dominant Spanish language. Now, most of us probably hadn't realized that an entire language needs a response, but Salon realized. And they explained that Latinx is a superior word devised by, quote, feminist and queer Spanish speakers. It is, in fact, they said, revolutionary because it's inclusive of those who live outside the gender binary. The article continued, quote, that includes people like Aragani da Silva, a Venezuelan race and sexuality educator. They are 29 and have used they-them pronouns for little less than a decade. But they always knew that's how they felt. Da Silva just didn't know genderqueer was a possible identity. Now they can add Latinx as an identity too. I can understand some hesitance to the term Latinx. After all, X isn't a letter widely used in the Spanish language, so it might not feel organic rolling off the tongue. Da Silva understands that too, but it is what it is. It is what it is. How could you argue with that? Case settled. Especially now that a race and sexuality educator has ruled on the subject, then it just is what it is. Salon followed orders, and they published many articles in the past 5 years which adopted the Latinx term. Articles with headlines like, Hollywood's Latinx representation is dismal. Why don't movies look more like America? And also, Hollywood is still overlooking Latinx filmmakers. My story matters. My pain matters. There was even an article published last month about the magic of Miami's modern daiquiri. And it tells us that daiquiris are, quote, a tangible representation of the relationship between Cuba, Latinx culture, and Miami. But it seems that sacred bond has now been broken, at least as far as Salon is concerned. This article was published by the outlet yesterday. It says, stop using Latinx if you really want to be inclusive. The writer Melissa Ochoa explains that though when she first heard Latinx in 2017, she thought it was progressive and inclusive, she has now realized that there's a dark underbelly to this particular form of gibberish. Damning it with the harshest term available to a leftist, she has declared the term problematic. Ochoa explains that, first of all, nobody in the actual Latino community uses the term. She says that the term was invented and is being pushed by American-born academics mostly. The marginalized communities it's meant to represent don't like it, don't want it. She says that this makes the entire thing kind of elitist and patronizing. She even points out that Latinx erases sex distinctions in situations where she would prefer to keep them in place. So, for example, she says, when you use the word Latinx to describe Hispanic women in fields where they are, quote, underrepresented, we're only further obscuring their contributions. Finally, she observes that the X affixed to the word is not pronounceable in the Spanish language. And she also wonders how far this will go. To refer to someone from Mexico or Argentina, do we have to now call them Mexicanix and Argentinx? It's a slippery slope, she says. This is what Ochoa is arguing. And it sounds exactly like everything I've been saying about this issue for the past 5 years and everything that all of us on the right have been saying. We have been making all of these exact arguments ever since we first heard about this nonsense. But it will not shock you to learn that Salon is not going to credit us with enlightening them on this topic or winning the argument. They're not going to acknowledge us at all. No, they're going to pretend that they arrived at this conclusion on their own. And worse, they're going to find a way somehow to double down even while backing down. This is a move that is you only find on the left, and they're very good at it. To back down while also doubling down. The writer continues, many academics might feel compelled to continue to use Latinx because they fought hard to have it recognized by their institutions, or they've already published the term in an academic journal. But there's a much better gender-inclusive alternative, one that's been largely overlooked by the U.S. academic community and is already being used in Spanish-speaking parts of Latin America, especially among young social activists in those countries. It's Latine. So that's Latine, Latine. Not Latina, Latine. And it's far more adaptable, she says, to the Spanish language. It can be implemented as articles, les instead of los or los, the words for the. When it comes to pronouns, L can become a singular form of they and used in place of the masculine L or feminine Ella, which translate to he and she. It can also be readily applied to most nationalities, such as Mexicana or Argentina. I believe Latina accomplishes what Latinx originally meant to and more. Similarly, it eliminates the gender binary in its singular and plural form. However, Latina is not confined to an elite English-speaking population within the US. It is inclusive. Language matters. Latina embodies that inclusivity across socioeconomic status, citizenship, education, gender identity, age groups, and nations, while honoring the Spanish language in the process. Well, this is the most you can really ever expect from the left these days. Every once in a while, a stray like Ochoa here will wander dangerously close to the precipice of rationality and then right before taking the final plunge, tumble back in the same direction she came from. Indeed, all of the very true and valid criticisms of Latinx that she made, or rather we made and then she claimed credit for, are abandoned and ultimately contradicted by her proposed solution. She is still proposing manipulating a language to suit the needs and desires of an academic elite. She is still advocating something that nobody in the Latino community uses or will use. She is still erasing sex distinctions. So Latina has all of the same problems of Latinx, except that it arguably maybe sounds slightly less stupid, slightly. She seemed for a moment tempted, but ultimately could not bring herself to simply say, because this is all that needs to be said, simply say to the so-called non-binary people, get over yourselves. We aren't going to change an entire language to suit you. Just deal with it, you pretentious egomaniacs. But she cannot say that. And so she will inevitably be stuck always catering to the whims of the most narcissistic and self-involved people on her side of the ideological divide. And she will do this even at her own expense, at the expense of her culture and her language. What she cannot see, what nobody on the left can see, because if they could see it, they'd no longer be on the left, is that universal inclusiveness is not a virtue. It's also not coherent or possible. You cannot include everything in anything, because if you try, you only end up turning the thing into nothing, or else you end up including a group while excluding another. See, the most that inclusion can ever hope to be, at least this kind of leftist version of inclusion, is a lateral move. It's a trade-off. You swap one excluded group for another. Only the group excluded in the name of inclusion is usually the group that by all rights should be the most included. And the group included is the one that by all rights should not be included at all. So the manipulation of the Spanish language is the perfect example of this, as it includes these pompous LGBT-obsessed academics while excluding the everyday average Spanish-speaking people who've been using this language for centuries without a problem. They don't see a problem here. This is a problem created by academic elites on the left. Here's a general rule, and this you could just take to the bank, okay? If everyone is doing something without an issue, and then you come along and you're the only one having a problem, that's probably because you are the problem. But usually, inclusion simply means destroying that which everyone is being included in. Because when everyone is included in the definition of the word woman, the word ceases to have all meaning. When the borders are erased and everyone is included as a citizen, citizenship ceases to have all meaning. When every shape is included in the word square, squares cease to have all meaning. I am not an advocate for inclusiveness because I would prefer for everything to be known and seen for what it is and treated accordingly. Not everything can be everything. In fact, nothing can be everything, or else everything will be nothing. Now I've kind of confused myself, which I think is sort of the point. And the real point for us is that Salon, despite coming precariously close to a logical viewpoint, still landed a million miles away, and thus is today canceled. And that'll do it for us for this portion of the show as we move over to the members block. Hope to see you there. If not, talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.